Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 7th meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education. We will be moving into executive session. First, let me say that in accordance with the state sunshine law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education was provided on December 3rd, 2020 to the Hillsborough Beacon and the Courier News. May I have a roll call, please? Ms. Sangiuliano?
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Ms. Haas?
Here.
Dr. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Maroon?
Here.
Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Ms. Stats?
Here.
Ms. Trujillo?
Here.
And Dr. Sasan?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to take a motion to move into executive session, but first I'll read the bit. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required, as permitted in Section 7B of the Act. Resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough and the County of Somerset in the State of New Jersey as follows. The matter to be discussed is a grievance with the Hillsborough Educational Association. The matters discussed in executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Seeing none, we will now move into executive session and return at 7:30. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're back from executive session. May I have a roll call, please, Mrs. Sangiuliano?
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Ms. Haas?
Here.
Dr. Harris?
Here.
Maroon?
Here.
Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Ms. Stats?
Here.
Ms. Trujillo?
Here.
And Dr. Sasan?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America
And to the
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We have correspondence as listed. And then we have the regular meeting minutes from November 23rd, 2020 for approval. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any noes? Seeing none. Motion passes. Okay, Superintendent's report, Dr. Antunes.
Thank you, Dr. Swasan. Good evening, Hillsborough community. I hope everyone enjoyed a happy and healthy Thanksgiving break. Today, we return to hybrid instruction in the district. I, along with Dr. Feltry and Mr. Callahan, took the opportunity to visit a number of schools, 7 out of the 9 to be exact, and the laughter, voices, and joy from students was wonderful to hear. I would like to take a moment to dispel rumors and provide data for the board and the community of parents who shared concerns with me, other administrators, and the board regarding teacher absences and class coverage today. We were advised late yesterday afternoon that teachers were encouraged to stay home if they felt uncomfortable returning to the classroom. This measure resulted in 144 teacher absences for personal illness and 38 for family illness. As a point of reference, there were also typical absences for FFCRA, personal time, quarantine, work from home, and bereavement, which are not included in that number. Although personal phone calls were made to substitutes last night and early this morning, we were inevitably short-staffed in some buildings. This was unfortunate on many levels. Depending upon the situation, classes were combined and areas such as the cafeteria, library, and commons were utilized as safe and appropriate. Masks were worn by all and physical distancing was maintained at all times. However, it was most certainly an all-hands-on-deck approach in many of the buildings. It is important to note that some buildings were absolutely perfectly fine with typical absences. Overall, we had 226 absences and 109 remained unfilled. There were actually more absences district-wide, but we did not include administrators, buildings and grounds, etc. We were expecting 1,389 hybrid students to join us today district-wide and welcomed 943 this morning across all schools. So 68% of students who were expected to be in school today actually came. This pandemic has challenged us, brought to light parts of us that we'd prefer to keep hidden, and in many cases, it has brought out the best in people during the toughest of times. I commend and thank the teachers, support staff, and district and building administrators who did return to school today and helped in so many ways to compensate for those who were not in. We will continue to monitor attendance and address teacher absences. I must reiterate that in all of my communication with stakeholders, I have shared that our buildings are safe and protocols are in place. We have revised and adjusted protocols as necessary and appropriate and will continue to do so, especially as the guidelines continue to evolve. I have also committed to shutting down specific classes, programs, schools, and or the entire district if it becomes necessary to do so for any reason, whether it's COVID related or staffing related. We must all be prepared to pivot quickly, often with little lead time. Again, while not ideal, this is the current world in which we are living, and we're doing our absolute best to move forward in a reasonable manner. There are also rumors that we are not disclosing all positive COVID-19 cases. This is not true. If we know of the case, we disclose it. We have reported all cases of COVID-19 that affect our schools, hybrid students who may have come into school positive with COVID-19, staff who were in school and tested positive, and all virtual students who tested positive and participated on a club or team. We do and will not report COVID positive cases for virtual students unless they participate in face-to-face in-person extracurriculars. The fact is that school-based transmission, according to the CDC, remains low across the state. On another note, I would like to share that I look very forward to sharing our Teachers and Educational Services Professionals of the Year at our next board meeting. Principals are in the process of notifying each of the recipients. Additionally, as we traditionally do, I look forward to recognizing each of them at an upcoming future Board of Education meeting. Finally, just a reminder that due to the holiday schedule, we will be here again next Monday, December 14th, for our final board meeting of the calendar year. Thank you, Dr. Swasan.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. There was one committee meeting last week. It was the governance committee meeting. We had 2 agenda items, both of which are on the agenda tonight for one for second reading, 0169.02, and one for first reading, 0152, as it relates to board officers. So then I will move to comments from the public and the board. And so again, we will we very much welcome input from the public. During board meetings, there will be 2 30-minute periods of time that the meeting will be open for public comment, where members of the public are invited to comment, which they may do via Zoom, in person if they are attending in person, or via written comments sent via letter or email to boepubliccomments@hgps.us. During the first public comment period, members of the public may comment first about any item listed on today's agenda before the board votes. If time remains in this public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 0167. Before you state your question or comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes that there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent will address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. Kindly note that the Open Public Meetings Act and the privacy rights of public employees encompassed therein do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. So I will start with public comment as it relates to the board agenda. Is there anybody attending via Zoom or in person as it relates to the agenda? Right now to the agenda, and if we complete that, then I'll open it to all comments. Certainly. Okay, seeing none on the agenda, then I will open it to all topics. Mr. Goodhue.
Good evening, Henry Goodhue, Hillsborough Education Association. I would like to address a couple points as well as ones that just arose, specifically an assertion that there was an active attempt to not be there to support our students today. I understand that that is the rumor that is circulating. I would like to state that that is not fact. What has happened is that the issues have continued throughout the school year. The issues of no accommodations, the issue of staff members falling ill, the basic issues of prior to us switching to virtual, we had, I believe, close to 50 members in quarantine and I believe 160 absent on some days. And our fill rate for substitutes was around 60%. We're now currently below that 60%. So any absence is going to be felt more keenly. To be specific, there was a meeting last Thursday to talk about reopening the schools. We were not invited to that meeting. The administration was brought to that meeting. We received a courtesy phone call on Friday where we were advised that a message had been written and then the message was sent to the community. During that meeting, we expressed concerns related to meeting the needs of staff and how to make staff feel more comfortable. We further expressed those concerns in conversations that took place afterwards, yet nothing else occurred. When I raised concerns about some aspects of the message towards the end of the conversation that took place, I was told that it had already been sent. And here we sit waiting to see the inevitable spike from Thanksgiving. And as New Jersey has just topped 6,000 cases, what many members struggled to understand, and one of the points that I hoped to clarify was what has changed as we transition back to reopening from where we were 2 weeks ago. How does the physician that advises our district give a vastly different recommendation to Montgomery, which currently has 444 cases, but deem our schools quote unquote safe when we have over 1,200 cases? And in fact, our 2-week count is almost 50% for all of Montgomery's current count. When I posed these questions to the administration, there was no answer beyond Dr. Mendelbaum thinks we can safely reopen. Our members find no comfort in professional recommendations that change from town to town. In fact, when we polled our membership, close to 90% of the respondents expressed little to no confidence in the recommendations made. We are a district that relies upon data in almost every decision except now. Further, the reporting of COVID cases within districts fails to truly reflect what's going on. Central office is lumped together with buildings and grounds and transportation, even though they are in completely different locations. I understand that that may be an attempt to protect confidentiality, but an office with over 30 plus people in it, I believe is confidential enough, especially when people have no access to that office on a regular basis. As Dr. Antunes said, virtual students aren't reported, yet they fail to reflect whether or not they're fully interacting. We see if we can find them in extracurricular activities that are known, but we don't take into account that they are interacting with the hybrid students outside of schools. So I apologize. I know my time is short. What I will say is that we are currently in a situation with rising numbers, and the town hired more contact tracers. Our district has not. Classrooms struggle to maintain appropriate distancing. Students are still removing masks to eat snacks for longer periods of time that place all at risk. The medical needs of staff are still ignored, and when they could be addressed. No actions have been taken to provide greater safety, yet we continue on this path. That being said, I believe a common goal is shared. I believe we all want to reopen schools, but I think we need to do it safely. I cannot achieve, and this cannot be achieved with courtesy calls, only through collaboration. I will again say that we are willing to work together, but have little confidence that this will truly take place. I have little confidence in the direction that our district is taking, and I have great concern for where we find ourselves currently. Thank you.
I'm now calling on Angela Hoare. I'm going to promote you to panelist and then ask you to turn on your video and unmute yourself. Promote you to panelist and then go ahead, Ms. Hoare. Turn on your video and unmute yourself.
Hi. Hello, my name is Angela Orr. I live at 88 Equator Avenue in Hillsborough Township. I just wanted to share that. Hello, my name is Angela Orr. I live at 88. Sorry, I want to make sure that I'm okay. I just wanted to share that one of my concerns. I grew up in the Hillsborough Township public schools, and I greatly admire and loved all the teachers that I had in this district. One of the reasons I moved to this district was because of the education, and both me and all of my siblings benefited from the wonderful teachers that are in our schools. One of my biggest concerns has been that there hasn't been enough transparency from the administration on the teachers' behalf for the parents. I completely understand that kids learn better in a classroom environment, both for emotional and educational purposes. It is beneficial. However, the fact that the safety of not just the students, but the staff hasn't been considered has given me a lot of unhappy feelings when it comes to the administration. And I think there hasn't been a lot of transparency towards the parents. A lot of them haven't been aware that teachers have been denied the ability to teach remotely when medically necessary if they have documentation. And so there have been teachers who have been forced to either take leave or use their own personal time in order to make sure that they can be safe when they could be teaching remotely for the benefit of the students, whereas the administration has denied that opportunity for teachers, but are willing to pay higher substitute rates to entice substitutes to come in for the coverage shortages that there are, or to pay exponential third-party programs to cover for absences that are due to teachers who have been forced to take medical leave. I think that it should be something that is extremely well known throughout the community, and that is not the decision of the teachers. There are plenty of teachers who want to educate the kids, but cannot do so while keeping themselves safe if they're being forced to be in a classroom. So it's just something that I think should be more transparent as throughout the community, since the teachers are very well aware of that fact, but the parents are not. So I hope that the administration starts to think a little more about the teachers as far as their safety is concerned, since they could most definitely adequately teach their students remotely, since they've had to do it when it's been all virtual, and that there are benefits to that rather than having a substitute or a third-party program being the educating force in our kids' lives. So I thank you for your time.
LaShawn Arrington, I'm promoting you to panelist, and then I'm going to ask that you turn on your video and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, LaShawn.
Perfect. I just want to express my dissatisfaction with the lack of safety and protocol in our schools during the pandemic.
Can I ask for your name, for your address, please?
116 Brookside Lane, Hillsborough, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to work in New Brunswick public schools where they have put the safety the staff and students as a priority. In August, they said that we would be working remotely until February because they listened to the scientists that said that this pandemic would get worse before it got better. So they wanted to make sure that we all had a safe working environment, and at this time, that is remote. Staff is also given the option whether they want to go into the district or not go into the district. It's not mandated. So I know that it can be done. When we return back in February, there'll be sufficient PPEs for all staff and students. And in rooms where there are not air conditionings or ways to circulate air, they will be providing air purifiers. And I just really want to applaud all the staff that are advocating for better and safer working conditions, because I know as an educator that our working environment is our students' learning environment. And I, for one, do not want my child to spend hours daily in an unsafe working environment. So again, I applaud the staff that's standing up for my child who's in the high school and all the other students that are in the high schools as well for their own working environment. And I thank you for your time and allowing me to speak, and happy holidays to you all.
To you too. Ms. Volano, I'm promoting you to panelists and asking that you start your video and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Kelly Volano, 87 Meadowbrook Drive. I sent an email yesterday to the board, as I know that you all have gotten it. I have not received any kind of response. So the few questions that I do have that I'd like to just say publicly is that I'm curious to know more about Dr. Mendelbaum's suggestion or standing by Montgomery School District and staying remote until mid-January. I am concerned with the number of cases that are in our community and feel that it is not accurately being represented as high school students, especially whenever you look at our high school data. There was a parent that I do know personally who shared her daughter tested positive for COVID. She called the school, and the school still has not put that number on the chart.
That was during hybrid period. So, I mean, during a virtual period, so it would not have been reported because the child was not in school. So let me clarify that right off, Ms. Volano. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I do want to say, though, that it still gives an inaccurate picture of the number of students within the district that could be potentially COVID positive. So I guess, again, listening to what Mr. Goodhue had said about reporting cases, you know, are we picking and choosing what we are reporting as far as data goes? I also would like to know, you know, how does Dr. Mendelbaum encourage Montgomery to stay virtual, and also gives us the okay to go back to in person? When I looked at Dr. Antunis's two emails, the one before Thanksgiving and the one on December 4th, the same reasons still exist as to us being in a high area. We still have staff that will need to quarantine. The contact tracing we know is behind. I personally wrote in my letter that I would be appreciative as a staff member if students were not eating snack in the classroom where I teach. Even though it is a lunch period, there really is, I'm staying within my areas so that I am not being exposed to other people. Finally, I do want to say that one of the things that my own physician had suggested was an air purifier. Dr. Mendelbaum, who is a pediatrician, denied that request. I'm trying to wrap my head around why a doctor who doesn't know me and who is a pediatrician denied that request. And that is, in a lot of ways, a very small thing. But when I look at my colleagues who have much more high risk issues and they were denied and were told to take a leave, I just think that that's very not fair. So thank you for your time.
David Gordon, I'm going to promote you to panelist. Ask that you turn on your video and unmute.
Sorry about that. I didn't have my name changed. It should be Dana Gordon. Dana Gordon for Dumont Round. I want to know what's changed so drastically since November 20th to today. I have been looking at the current Cali, which looks almost identical to the one on November 20th, when we received word the schools would go fully virtual. We were in the high range then, and we're still in the high range now. For those who do not know what the Cali is, it's the COVID-19 map that shows the regions of New Jersey and their averages. It is located on the nj.gov website. The Cali map is updated every Thursday. The Cali is great at showing a region's average. While this map gives an average of cases in all the towns within a particular region, it is not very accurate at showing Hillsborough's average number of cases. Hillsborough cases have been far above the average at our Central West region. This is one place where being above average is not a gift. We are above average, and we've been above average of the Central West region on November 20th, and we're still above average now. The case rate for the Central West region most recently on the Cali, dated 11/28, is 27.73 per 100,000. To give you an idea of where Hillsborough is, at the same time, we were showing an average of 39.5. That's more than 10 cases per 100,000 over what the Central West is showing. And if you look on the Cali map, that 10 per 100,000 is already considered not ideal. You might ask, where are we today? Last week, we had another increase from 39.5 to 41.1 daily cases per 100,000. There has been no improvement, only increases. So I wonder, why would we reverse a decision to have an all virtual school when we are not seeing any improvement in town? Thank you.
Jordan, I don't have a last name for you, so please, I'm going to promote you to panelist. Please state your full name and...
Hi, I'm Jordan Lindsay, and I live at 16 Oliver Court. I'm a junior at HHS. Sure you're all aware at this point. I would just like to say, in regards to the obvious strike held by the teachers today, one day of learning can be brought back, but a loss of life cannot be. Take that into account, please. And I'd also like to say, you need to listen to the teachers and students. We are the ones that are going into these buildings. We are the ones giving or getting the education, and we are the ones who face the risks every day. The parents that stay home and get to work from home, granted, students have that option too, but teachers don't. They are being told to take leaves in which they don't have the money, frankly. They can't live off of not having a job. That's just not how it works. Especially in the economy we live in now. It's just, listen to us, listen to the teachers, please. And I'm tired of seeing my teachers treated like crap and like they're disposable. They're not disposable. A life isn't disposable. It doesn't matter the job, education, race. No one is disposable. That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any additional public comments. And we didn't have any email comments, so I will I'll close public comment, open board comment. Okay, I don't see any. Mrs. Stats.
I'm probably not going to say anything new. I'm getting the impression there wasn't any kind of collaboration other than with administration regarding the decision making. I got the impression that we were all in favor of doing some sort of collaboration, at least as far as accommodating teachers' requests to teach virtually. And I would like to see more collaboration occur. But overall, I'd also like to see more respect for everyone. And I think I've seen it from all sides. The reliance on name calling and judgment making from, like I said, from all sides, to exercise more empathy, even if you yourself don't experience what somebody else is experiencing. At least look at what they're going through, whether you're, if you're a parent, look at what the teachers are going through. Also look at what the administration is going through with all the difficult decisions they have to make. If you're, if for anyone on the staff or in the community or whatever, look at what the parents are going through. And there are lots of parents that do have to go to work. They don't really have a choice as well. And no matter what, exercise empathy and try to look at it from the other person's point of view. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Stats. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Gillette.
Okay, so I think I'm not going to say anything new either. I think some of the comments we heard were correct. There hasn't, in the case data, there hasn't been a lot of big change in the last 2 weeks. It's about the same. So, but what has changed since, May or since March is that keep learning more about how COVID-19 affects children, especially children 10 and under. And it just, the science just says they're not seriously affected. They're very low risk to transmit to anyone else. These are just facts. Having the schools, even the hybrid situation, 4 hours a day, that's to the detriment of small children. It's to the benefit of employees. So I don't like to hear that nothing is being done for employees, because the entire, especially K-4, probably K-6, the entire hybrid model is not to the benefit of children at all. You can put 20 children in every classroom, and it's not going to make a difference to the children. Every day, they can go 5 days a week, probably, with 20 children there. It does not matter. Even if they get it, they're not going to get sick for the most part. They're not going to transmit to anybody. That's it. This is all for the benefit of the staff. So if it's not enough benefit, then let's work on that. Like I said from the beginning, let's find out what we have to do so that we can start switching the balance back to have more benefit for kids, which is to be in school more hours, more days, especially kids 10 and under. High school, I don't know about that. They're like adults. So whatever we do for adults, we probably have to do at the high school. But for the small kids, it's different. That's the science. So let's figure out a way to do that. And I agree with Mrs. Stats. If there's some kind of collaboration that can be done, I mean, we've heard from board members that said that board doesn't collaborate with staff in that way. Okay, then administration has to do it. So that's all. I'm kind of worn out on this topic. I mean, I feel like I talk about it every 2 weeks and really nothing happens. I think that's the subtext of what Mrs. Stats was saying. When she says, I thought we agreed, or at least I thought we made a good case for more collaboration, and I don't see it. I think that's kind of what you're saying, and I kind of agree. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver.
I too didn't really want to say anything tonight, but I just want to reiterate again what Ms. Stats and Mr. Gillette have both said. I'm in complete agreement. I think, Dr. Antunes was faced with a very, very tough decision. And I think short of handing out gold bullion, you would have been criticized for anything you came up with. I'm a little bit disappointed that we've gotten to this point where we're just not listening and we're not cooperating. I've seen emails come in where teachers have been overheard talking about the call out Monday morning. So whether it was an orchestrated attempt to gain attention, we need to get along. We need to communicate. We need to get along because it's not a safety issue for the children. The children are the safest in schools. It's a staffing issue. It's an accommodation for teachers. And we need to listen because the children are suffering. There have been 49 deaths nationwide, children under the age of 18, not one in the state of New Jersey. One death is way too many, but they are the safest in schools. They're not catching COVID in the schools. Their mental health has a lot to do with this. They're suffering in this hybrid model. They're suffering in the remote model. We just need to get along. And again, I think I echo we're tired of talking about this. Let's move on. COVID's going to be with us for a while. The vaccine really isn't going to solve much. We need to figure out how to get the children back in school. Thank you.
Mr. Pulsifer.
Just one quick comment. We've seen a number of emails, and it was raised again tonight about the reporting of school-age children. I think it's important for people in the community to understand that if you really want to look for statistics across those ages, or actually any age, you shouldn't be looking at the school district for providing that information. There are many school-age children in this town. Separating the hybrid and virtual out of this, there are many students in this town that are either homeschooled or go to private schools. We have no idea what they do, where they go, and what they're exposed to or not, and we should not be accountable, the Hillsborough School District, for producing counts of students that have absolutely nothing to do with our district. That's something that the Township Department of Health should be reporting, and I believe they are, or certainly have no reason to believe they're not. But I think people, when you raise the concern that our students are interacting with potentially other kids at home, even if it's hybrid versus virtual, there's a whole nother cohort of students, of student-aged children that we have no insight into. So if you're really concerned about what's going on with school-aged children in this town, you shouldn't be looking at the district's numbers. You should be looking at the Department of Health numbers, because we have no insight into what all those other students that have absolutely nothing at all to do with our district. So if you want those numbers, you should really look at the town and not questioning what we're reporting from the district.
Mr. Oliver, you had something else to add?
I just wanted to echo Mr. Pulsifer's comments, which are very on point. One of the biggest issues that is being faced with the town is not alone the contact tracing, but the reluctance for people to give information to the contact tracers. So if people are reluctant to give information to a contact tracer, the contact tracing system is worthless in its own right. But I think it gets to the point where people are starting to get fed up with this. The CDC changed their guidelines from 7 to 10 days quarantine from 14, not because they felt that was safer. They felt people would be more apt to abide to a 7 to 10 day quarantine.
That's not true. It's not true. I'm sorry. The 7 to 10 day quarantine is based on data that suggests that most people are positive after 5 days, and that if you haven't seen symptoms after 5 days, it's unlikely you'll see it at 10 days. So 7 to 10 day quarantine is more appropriate and enable people to get back to life a little sooner. It is not that we have not seen cases at 14 days. It is that those are so few and far between. And when they looked back at what those are, they had multiple contacts. So it's 14 days from one, but maybe 7 days from another. So it's not, I don't want people believing that the CDC is making a recommendation based on the will of the people. That's not their job. That's not what
the CDC said that in their statement, that they were reducing it from 7 to 10 days because they felt as if people would be more apt to follow the quarantine guidelines. That was the actual statement from the CDC.
It's also because the data indicated that was, if there were multiple cases coming out at 14 days after contact, they would have never said that. They would have said, suck it up, quarantine for 14 days. That would have been scientifically appropriate. Okay, so.
Yeah, I mean, they said it in the evidence, but what my point is I think the contact tracing is only as good as the information that's being provided by the people and the data that's being submitted. You could look to data from any different site, however you want to spin this, and I think what Mr. Pulsifer is saying is more accurate than looking at individual data that a lot of cases have been cited here tonight. So that's the only comment I wanted to make.
Thank you. So I had just a couple of comments on some of the questions that were asked. First of all, the question was, what has changed? And Dr. Mandelbaum's role in all of this, right? So what has changed is that when the data, when Dr. Antutis made the first decision to go hybrid, go virtual for a 2-week period, and that's what it was, a 2-week period. It wasn't to go virtual for any longer than that. She was very clear that she would make the decision again on December 4th. But what changed is that in that period, there was Thanksgiving. And we had data and knowledge that people were probably going to not abide by CDC recommendations to celebrate Thanksgiving with those whom they lived. And in knowing that, we didn't want to be in a position where so many staff would call out, because now we were in a high zone. And so what that means is that contacts, so staff who had contacts who had already been contacted with COVID would then have to quarantine. So we anticipated, based on the rates that were quoted of 160 potentially, with 69 quarantining, 60 people quarantining, looking at the actual data prior to, that would be difficult. We had 51 staff in quarantine on the 20th. So if we saw rises much above that, it would be difficult to ensure appropriate coverage. So what has changed is that Thanksgiving has passed, and we're more than 10 days beyond Thanksgiving. And so Dr. Antunis is, in speaking with her, that went into a lot of her thinking about coming back to school. With regard to Dr. Mandelbaum's role, you will note in the Montgomery release that they did that in consultation with Dr. Mandelbaum and with their township Department of Health. When we spoke to Dr. Mandelbaum, I was included on those calls prior to the November 20th announcement. And Dr. Mandelbaum was in no way supportive of staying out until February or January. He actually anticipated that Montgomery would only be virtual through this week, just as we did. It was a couple of days later that we heard that Montgomery made the decision to go through. I don't know what happened between that, but in talking to Dr. Mandelbaum, he was not supportive of that. He did not feel we needed to do that, again, given the cases being very low in Hillsborough, in our schools. The reporting within the district, I think, has been covered, but we do only report those students that are hybrid or participating in after-school extracurricular activities where they have to come into the school. If they're in a virtual club, we don't, and they're virtual students, we do not include them. That's only about 3,100 to 3,200 students. So, it's not even the 7,500 that we would normally have coming into our buildings on a regular year. So as Mr. Pulsifer said, that, as well as those students who are going to private and parochial schools, that's all included on the township website, but not necessarily on the district website. Another piece was talking about the case rate. So, as multiple board members have said, students are not nearly affected, schools seem to be a very safe place, not only for our students, but if you look at our total staff across the whole of the pandemic, we have a 1.85% infection rate. We have a student rate of 0.7%. That is incredibly low compared to the general population. So I would argue that schools are not just the safest place for students, but they are the safest place for staff, because we are taking everything so seriously, and maintaining distancing and, wearing masks. And even when students do take off their masks, as Mrs. Villano stated, to have a snack, there should be nobody within any distance where that is 15 minutes in less than 6 feet, which is what the CDC requirement is. I did have the opportunity over the last 2 weeks to actually take the contact tracing course because I wanted to try to help the community. It's very illuminating. Nothing that I, as a scientist, didn't know myself, but it's actually very worthwhile for those people who are interested. The Hopkins course is free until the end of the year, so you can sign up and take it and learn a little bit more about this disease and what contact tracing entails. And then in going back to the issue of accommodations for staff members, being very transparent, which I believe we have been. We've discussed this at every meeting since the beginning of school. We had 50% of our staff request to work from home. There is no way that we can accommodate 100% of those requests. So it was looked at, and those staff that had medical accommodations that rose to the level that was determined through the process, of which board members were not party to, were provided accommodations of various levels. I think there were very few cases, 1 or 2, work from home. But then there were other accommodations provided to those who warranted them. But there is no way that we can do 100% of the, allow 100% of the teachers who wanted to work from home to work from home. That is just not within the realm of being able to open schools. I've seen, emails saying other districts did it. Well, other districts, didn't do it for long because it was an impossible task. We heard from neighboring districts that tried to do it, saying that it was difficult. So, and next to impossible. So, while it is, and I feel for staff that are scared, the fact of the matter is, as I reported out last time, the majority of our recent cases are staff, not students. And that is incredibly unfortunate. But when we do contact tracing, except I believe in 1 or 2 cases, we have been able to identify the source outside of the school. And in the case where we couldn't, the school was closed down and cleaned, which is an appropriate thing that the administration did. The parents weren't notified because it was during a hybrid part where staff could still enter the building if they so choose, or I should say teachers could, but we did close down 1 building over break. So I did want to make those clarifications. I understand that tensions are high, but I think what we have to keep in mind is that it is the school district's job to educate students. The best way to do that, if we can safely do it, is in an in-person environment. Right now, we have about 40% of parents who are choosing for their kids to be in person. I know that there are many board members who want us to bring them back more than just hybrid, if there's that few. Again, that was something that the administration was moving towards. And hopefully we can do that after the new year. But in the meantime, we have about 16 days until, and we should all just pray that we maintain the status quo and people continue to, or actually people take this more seriously with the rising numbers. And again, if you have any symptoms or your child has any symptoms, please do not allow them to come into the school or go to see other people. Stay home. So With that, I don't know that there's anybody else who has any comments. We'll go to our action agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Sasan.
Thank you.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the education agenda as follows. 10.1, motion to approve professional travel related expenses. And motion to approve policies and regulations for second reading. Do you want me to repeat it? Okay, I'll repeat that. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the education agenda as follows. 10.1, 10.2, motion to approve professional travel related expenses and to approve policies and regulations for second reading as listed.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve items 11.1?
10.1.
Sorry, 10.1 to 10.2 as read by the superintendent?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Maroon. May I have a roll call, please?
Sure, Mr.
First, actually, any discussion before we actually vote on it? Sorry about that. Ash, go ahead.
Mr. Gillette,
Yes.
Haas,
Yes.
Dr. Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Maroon,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Ms. Stats,
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sasan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the human resources agenda as follows. 11.1 to 11.13. Motion to approve retirements and resignations. And I'd like to point out Dawn Cervellino, service to the district, 15 years. Motion to approve revised leaves of absences. Motion to approve revised leave replacement teacher. Motion to approve transfer, change in assignments and contract change. Motion to approve leaves of absence and appointments as listed. Motion to approve a practicum placement. Motion to pre-approve extra coverage as listed, as well as extra coverage. Motion to approve 6-period coverage. Motion to approve administrator salary change, and a motion to approve policies for second reading as listed.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve items 11.1 through 11.13 as read by the superintendent?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer and Dr. Harris. Any discussion? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please, Mrs. Sangiuliano?
Sure. Mr. Gillette,
Yes.
Ms. Haas,
Yes.
Dr. Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Maroon,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Stats,
Yes.
Trujillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sasan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the operations agenda as follows. 12.1 to 12.4. Motion to approve the settlement agreement. Motion to approve bylaw policies and regulations for second reading as listed. Motion to approve bylaw for first reading. And motion to approve a resolution.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve items 12.1 through 12.4 as read by Dr. Antunes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Any discussion? Mrs. Trujillo.
I have a question for Mr. Lapira regarding the bylaws that are listed, the board member use of social networks and the board officers. Although I was the one who brought up the bylaw 152. My question is, when we were back in 2018, when we were talking about doing a referendum, the advice was that we should wait for the new board to pass that referendum language so as not to bind the new board. So my question is, on these types of bylaws, is it, because it's not specifically to the workings of the district, like the day-to-day, that these are bylaws, could these bylaws, if they were to be passed now, be challenged by the new board or by the public?
That's a good question. I think with regard to 152, which is the bylaw regarding the election of officers, I think the answer to that one is an unequivocally no. And the reason I say that is because you have to have two readings, and that's going to be critical on January, whatever the date is, January 6th, January 5th, whatever your organization date is. So it's action that is necessary to do before the reorg or the organization meeting. So without adopting that bylaw now, you effectively aren't going to be able to change the election. So that's that. I think with regard to the others, I mean, the real question that comes up on those is whether or not, I guess when we say we're binding a future board, so these bylaws can be changed, obviously, by the new board with two readings. You know, something like a referendum can't be. So that was something that was big ticket. I don't know that I've ever seen. Well, I shouldn't say that. I should say that in the NOAC case, which is the seminal case about binding a future board, that was more actually what the commissioner did was he let everything go, even though he said that you shouldn't act on those things. But it was literally the meeting that was hours before the new board started. So I think the closer in time that you get to the new board, the less justification you have. So I think in these, I don't think a challenge is likely. Number one, because we did start talking about it back in November. And number two, these are things that are relatively easily changed in terms of the bylaws with two readings. That was kind of long-winded, but did I answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Gillette?
So I'd like to, before we vote, to separate 169.02. I don't know if anybody else is going to accept that. That's the social network. And I did have a comment on it. Wait, can I? All right, so I spoke a lot about my objection to this last time, so I'm not going to read all that. But, you know, these type of policies, in my opinion, they're used by ultimately, they're used by the majority of the board to bludgeon the minority. The majority of the board gets the board president. The board president is the spokesman. And only a majority opinion is going to get out on social network because the board president is always going to be allowed to speak. And minority board members will never have their opinion out. I don't like that. We have another policy also, and I'm sorry I printed it out at home, but I don't remember what it is now. We have another policy specifically stating, and Mrs. Trio may have mentioned it in a previous meeting, another policy specifically saying that a board member is permitted to speak on any topic. So which policy would take precedence? Thirdly, what's the penalty? Can boards have a penalty against one of their own members and enforce it? If the ultimate penalty is to submit an ethics violation against the board member, then we already can do that. We don't need this policy for it. So, you know, for those reasons, and of course the fourth reason is that there's just a total double standard. We always hear like, well, you know, you shouldn't speak on a topic because we only act as a whole. Well, every policy or lawmaking or body like this acts as a whole. No single assemblyman in Trenton makes a law on their own, but they're not inhibited from speaking. Nobody says when one state senator says something, you say, "Oh, he said it. Now it must be true. Now it's law." Of course not. So why does that prohibition descend on 4,500 board members? It's ridiculous. And I guess the fifth thing, and I will reiterate something I said last time, is that people, when you're running for school board, when you do your petition and you go out and you're going to campaign or whatever, you might make a flyer, you might make a web page. So during that period, you can put your opinion out on the internet about something, but not the other 2.5 years of your term. That's completely hypocritical and not rational and not logical. I don't understand why we have these illogical policies even come up here for free speech on everything. None of this makes sense. So there, I got agitated. I got it all out. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Mrs. Stats, then Mrs. Trujillo.
Regarding the same policy or bylaw.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. There doesn't seem to be any stipulation where a board member could at least say on, social media that they are speaking on their own behalf, where I've understood that that's okay to do that. Again, as long as they're not violating other ethical issues. So I'm hoping that maybe that could be added in. And also regarding item 12.3 for the election of board officers, as I'd mentioned in an email, I was wondering if we could add in there something like in the event of a tie, if there's like, I guess if there's 3 or more people in the event of a tie, the nominee with the least number of votes would be eliminated, and then another vote would then take place. So I don't know if that we can consider adding that in.
You could certainly, so that the typical way of handling this, and I think that the policy, the bylaw that you've revised, I think is a good one. I like the way that that's handled, which is to say that you vote on all the candidates at once. So we go around the room and we say the name of the person we're voting for, and then someone who gets a majority wins, as opposed to a plurality, which is a little bit weird. I don't think that I would like that myself, but legally you could do it, but I think it's better to have it this way. So this is a good policy. In terms of a tie, what you would typically do, although I guess you could do it however you like, and you could structure it however you like. I guess you could do it that way, which is to say eliminate the lowest vote getter and then re-vote on the rest. Or you could say, let's vote on the 2 highest vote getters and then discard the rest.
Okay.
And that's one way of doing it, which I think is the way it would typically be done. I mean, the only time you're going to have problems, so to speak, is if you have like a 3-3-3
Right.
or 2-2-2-2 and 1, but hopefully we don't have that. But I think that so I think the default would be that you would do maybe we should specify this, that you would do a runoff between the 2 highest vote getters. But if people are more comfortable with eliminate the lowest number of votes and then just go again, you could do that too. It probably, unless you have many candidates running, probably will be moot. I mean, if you only have 2, then it's easy. We don't have to worry about it. But if you have 3, usually, unless it's all 3-3-3, you will have someone that will have 2 highest votes. And if it's not 5 or more, then you just do a runoff between those 2. So I think that it makes sense to clarify it. Depending on how the board wants, you could probably say that the 2 highest vote getters will then go to a runoff. Does that make sense? Okay.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say, that actually some of that came up during our discussion in the committee, and I think we didn't want to try to write down all the different ways that you would potentially do the math. If it's 3-3-3, you also have to count for abstentions. It could be 2-2-2 and 3 abstentions. I mean, there's a lot of ways that the math could work out where you can't take the top 2 or eliminate the bottom 1. And so we left it that certainly what my thoughts on this was that if that was the case, that we would leave it open for discussion, and then have after some amount of discussion from board members, you could vote again, whether that was somebody saying offering to withdraw or advocating for somebody else, whatever else. But instead of trying to get all the different possible ways the math could go wrong, sort of in the sense of a vote, it would be easier just to say that there would be a revote, and then for any motion that would go to a revote, you would open the table for discussion. and that you can proceed from there. But the number of ways that we could go wrong mathematically with trying to pick the top two or remove the last one, and how do you account for every one of those in a bylaw or policy was probably too much.
Yeah, so it was noted that I think several members on the governance committee have been on the board for 15 plus years, or we covered 15 plus years between several people. And that's, with the exception of last year, most of these things are just one person running for each office. And so, do you want a policy to cover every situation? You should never draft policies or bylaws to fit an individual or a situation, but make them applicable to all. Now, with that being said, again, there are numerous different things that could happen, but, one policy that we're looking at said something to the effect, in the event no candidate receives a majority of the votes cast, a second election shall be conducted between the two candidates receiving the highest number of votes. Now, again, that implies that there are two candidates, so it's not a 3-3-3 or a 2-2-2-1, whatever combination Chris was talking about. But if that makes people more comfortable, I don't see a problem with adding that language after the language on the candidate receiving a majority of vote of the members of the board present and constituting quorum will be elected to the office. So we could, in fact, do that if that's the will of people here.
And then just to follow up on that, if you had, like you said, the 2-2-2 with abstentions or the 3-3-3, in that scenario, since there is no ability to have the two highest candidates remain, you would just need to have a revote after discussion, as Mr. Pulser pointed out. And then if you still have that problem after a second vote, unless someone wants to make a third vote, technically speaking, you're at a deadlock and it's going to go to the executive county superintendent, which typically does not happen. But I will tell you, in districts other than Hillsborough, I have seen it happen. So hopefully not.
Okay, so I guess we have a motion on the table for all of the items except for 0169.02, which Mr. Gillette wanted to separate. I'm going to separate 0152 as well, just so we can straighten out this language. So we'll vote on everything else, and then I'll take 0152 followed by 0169.02. Mrs. Trujillo.
So can I still have comments on 169 right now?
You can, yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to refer to the policy that Mr. Gillette was referring to, which is 146, I believe, board member authority. And I guess that's where I kind of get confused between what 169.02 is saying and what 146. They do seem to conflict. On public expressions, it says board members are entitled to express themselves publicly on any matter, including issues involving the board and the school district. Individual board members cannot, however, express the position of the board except as expressly authorized in accordance to board policy 9120, etc. So I think that 169.02 is in conflict, or am I maybe I'm misunderstanding it.
No, I mean, my read of that is that, as was done before, that you could express your opinion as your own single opinion, but that you're not answering for the board. And so, as was done during the referendum, several board members said, I'm on the board, but I'm not. I don't speak for the board, but if you wanted more information on this, you could refer to whatever. I don't think this is necessarily disallowing that, but I do have to caution board members that, a big part of the discussion that happened on 0169.02 was that once you get into the habit of having people believe that you do business on social media, then anything that is not answered on social media is believed to be true. This is a problem with our society. It's across, it's not just Hillsborough, it's across the whole country, that people go to Facebook for their news. I saw, somebody post about, a question, is the Griggstown Causeway open or closed? I mean, come on, Nixle provides that information directly to your phone if you need that. And several people said, oh, it's still open. And then I saw somebody actually write back, well, I just went there because you told me to, and it's closed. I mean, well, that's your fault for believing what's on social media. What I don't want to get into the position, and this will not be my problem after January 4th, is having people believe that's what somebody puts out there is the truth because no board member or the president didn't object to it, because that is a full-time job. We in the district do not have a person who actually does that. Even when we had a communications person, they did not troll social media, and I would not wish that on anybody. So I do think that it still allows individuals to express their opinion as long as they say they are not speaking on behalf of the board. Mr. Pulsifer.
I think, and this may be a little bit picky, but we're talking about policy, and so wording really matters. To me, the distinction between those two policies is that item number 6 in the list in bylaw 169.02 uses a very specific word, which to me separates the whole thing. Respond. Okay, you're free to go out and post your opinions as long as you put the caveat that you are on the board, but you don't speak for the board. That's fine for putting your opinions up and posting anything you want. But this speaks specifically to responding. And I'm pretty sure it's clear in our other policies that responding is the job of the president and is not the job of any board member to pick up the mantle to say, I will respond. When somebody posts a question to the district or questions, inquiries, request for information, whatever that is, and we're responding, that is the job of the president. I don't see any way that saying not respond limits any of your other abilities, including the other 2.5 years of your boardsmanship, to put your opinion out there. If you initiate the information, then there's nothing wrong with you posting that. This policy specifically says not respond, and it's been clear through all the ethics training I've ever had and the policies and everything else that the job of responding to public questions is the job of the president and the superintendent and not board members. So to me, I don't see a conflict between the policies because this one specifically talks about the job of responding to postings and questions, etc.
Thanks, Mr. Pulsifer. I will also add that there were times when I was actually called, somebody called me out on Facebook and said, could you respond to this? And about graduation, about when schools would reopen, things like that. And what I said in those posts were, I am the president, I speak for the board, but the board does not do business on Facebook. Please send that letter to boe@hgps.us and I will respond like I do to other people. Specifically because I don't want to only respond to those things on which I am called out and then miss a whole host of other things because, I have a full-time job. I don't need 5 of them. And so, I don't want to be responsible for that. But again, January 4th, it will not be my problem. So anyway, with that, let's vote on the first set, and then we'll do a 169.02 and then a 0152 and see how people feel about adding the additional language. So may I have a roll call? Mrs. San Giuliano on 12.1 to 12.4 with the without 12.3, I guess. No, and a 169.02 of 12.2 and 12.3. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Haas?
Yes.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Maroon?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Ms. Stats?
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
And Dr. Sasan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve bylaw 0169.02 for second reading, which is part of item 12.2?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Mrs. San Giuliano, roll call, please.
Mr. Gillette?
No.
Ms. Haas?
Yes.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Maroon?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Ms. Stats,
No.
Mr. Hio,
No.
and Dr. Sasan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second for item 12.3, which is bylaw 0152?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Okay, so the question is, do we want to add some language regarding what happens in the event there is not a single candidate receiving the majority of votes or not? So I'm actually posing that question to see whether or not we want to take, actually, I'm just going to let the vote go and see if we have enough. If people vote no, then we will revisit that language. Is that that might be the clearest way to do it?
Or actually, maybe if someone wants to make a motion to amend it to include that language that you read
Perfect.
before, why don't we do that? And if that motion doesn't carry,
I
then
don't find it objectionable, so I think it's fine so that's fine. Mrs. Stats, would you like to make a motion to include the language that I read, and I can read it for you if you so choose?
Sure.
So the language that I was suggesting was, in the event no candidate majority of the vote cast, a second election shall be conducted between the two candidates receiving the highest number of votes. That would be inserted prior to the last sentence of the third paragraph. And then it would say, in the event no candidate receives, in the event that no two candidates receive, what do you suggest, Mr. LaPira?
I like the one that you just read.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be in lieu of that last sentence.
Yeah, so that would be, let me just make sure I have that specific policy open. But yes, in general, that would be, so the last sentence says, yeah, the procedure shall continue until someone receives the majority vote. Yes, I think you would replace that last sentence.
Okay. So
with what you read.
So it would read instead, in the event no candidate receives a majority of the votes cast, a second election shall be conducted between the two candidates receiving the highest number of votes. And we could just say the procedure shall continue until somebody receives a majority of the vote.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to make that motion, Jane?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Any other discussion or correction, Mr. Pulsifer?
I can't support. I understand the intent, and I agree with the intent. I cannot support a policy that would put us in a position where we can't follow our own policy. I think that would be kind of silly, because again, if we have a 3-3-3 or anything else where there are not two clear leaders in the vote, this policy can't be applied, because how do you take the top two vote getters when there aren't a top two? If it's 3-3-3, this policy leaves us in no man's land. We shouldn't have a policy that we can't use to address a situation that occurs. If we're going to go to that level of detail, it has to cover things that could occur. And this policy clearly fails if we have anything more than two people getting an equal number of votes. And so my question would be, what does this policy say we do in the case of, for example, a 3-3-3 vote? Who loses? Who gets eliminated? Are we flipping a coin? What are we doing to decide who's the odd person out to get only the top two, when mathematically that does not exist? We shouldn't have a policy that we can't actually apply in certain scenarios.
Mrs. Stats.
I think you make a good point, Mr. Pulsifer. So I'm wondering if we should add more flexibility beyond what it's currently stated, or as well as what it has been amended to. I guess maybe add what we've amended it to, and then, but in other case, I don't know how we would, if we leave it as is, we're talking about having voting in perpetuity unless people change their mind, I guess. I don't know how that would.
That's exactly what happens, right? I mean, for instance, A similar situation would be if a board member resigns and we have to fill that position, then, I think it happened when I was named to the board. There was a first round of voting and then a second round of voting, and people changed their minds. You could also equally have somebody who says, I'm relinquishing, I no longer want to be considered for president, and then you redo that bid. So I think not saying anything and leaving it the way it was originally intended gives the flexibility to be able to do that. But, if we have to spell it out, then, it gets complicated because there's so many scenarios that could happen. So.
Well, I guess maybe I suggest, writing it the way it was amended to, and then say, in all other cases, the procedure shall continue until someone receives a majority vote.
No.
Okay, Mrs. Haas.
Honestly, the previous policy lasted us for over 30 years without a problem until last year. And quite honestly, I don't see having continuous votes in public for a position that is supposed to represent the majority of the board. So the point is, if you can't get it to a consensus, it goes to the executive superintendent. And the bottom line is, if everybody is that self-absorbed that they would prefer for the executive county superintendent to take a position on who should lead this board instead of possibly stepping down, stepping back, or whatever, you get a bad result. You get the worst possible result. So I really think, in line with what Chris said, the more micromanaging we do on this policy, the less options the board has. And we should just leave the policy in terms of getting to a majority vote, and hopefully what happened last year does not happen again. And if it doesn't work out, you get the executive county superintendent.
Okay, so Mrs. Trujillo.
So I know that we have a first and a second. So I kind of, in this case, the way the policy was written as attached satisfies at least what I was looking for, which is not to have the race to nominate, that each person who is nominated gets voted on. So this policy would account for that, and I do understand what Chris is saying. So I guess somebody, I don't know. I guess we could vote on it, and then we
could just table the amendment.
You could do that.
But it has to be one of the people who first or seconded.
Yeah, so, or we vote on the amendment, either one. I guess I'm looking at you because I don't know. Jane, sorry. I don't know what you
Jane,
prefer.
would you like, Jane and Ann, would you like the amendment voted on? And if it fails, we take up 0152, or would you like to table the amendment?
Well, if we table the amendment, would there be time for it to be?
We revert back to what was attached without the amendment. We vote on that.
Okay.
And you still have one more reading. I just want to reiterate.
Yeah, that's not
okay. That's right.
So people can give some thought to it between now and next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll table the amendment.
Okay. So I'd like a roll call, please, on the original 0152 attached to the agenda, Mrs. Sangiuliano.
What are we voting on?
We're voting on 0152 as attached.
As it came out of committee. With no amendments.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Ms. Haas?
Yes.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Maroon?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
No.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Ms. Stats?
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
And Dr. Sasan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I would also like to add that 0152 was discussed at several governance committee meetings in March and April. I couldn't quite remember that last time, but I'm glad we finally got this through. Okay, so let's see. We are at comments from the public and the board again. So we very much welcome input from the public during board meetings. There will be two 30-minute periods of time that the meeting will be open for public comment, where members of the public are invited to comment, which they may do via Zoom, in person if they are attending in person, or via written comments sent via letter. During the second public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 0167. Before you state your comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes that there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent will address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. Kindly note that the Open Public Meetings Act and the privacy rights of public employees encompassed therein do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. So are there comments from members of the public? Mr. Goodhue?
Henry Goodhue, Hillsborough Education Association. I just wanted to clarify a couple of comments that were made. I will grant you that research does seem to indicate that children are less impacted, and that is, we're blessed that is the case, that children are not suffering the effects to the same degree that adults are. But we are seeing research that indicates that there are long-term or possible long-term heart effects to children, as well as effects possibly neurological ones. And recently, the American Academy of Pediatrics put out research saying that they noted a 29% increase among children aged 4 to 18. So one of the very sources that most of the country was relying upon is now noting some caution there. So I just do want to note that. And I also want to say that much of the research has not delved into whether or not there are asymptomatic students in school. And it's admittedly difficult to do that without random testing of students and those kinds of things. But I just want to put it out there that is possibly a piece of this that does not necessarily get much consideration when we're looking at whether or not staff members are falling ill. And, across the country, we haven't lost many students yet, thankfully, but we have lost hundreds of educators already. We lost 72 in New York City in a very short period of time. We have lost literally hundreds throughout the country. And I am very thankful that our district is not one of them. And I don't want us to become one of them. So I urge you to reconsider the conversations that you are having about accommodations and about supporting the staff within the buildings, because if we don't have supported staff who feel safe, who feel valued, they're not going to deliver the same high quality education. It's just not possible if they're under that amount of duress. And I do want to clarify, there was a comment made that 50% of the staff requested to work from home. I'm not aware of where that statistic came from. Our records indicate that it's probably closer to 10%. We referenced this at a board meeting a few times ago when we spoke about Princeton and the fact that Mr. Lapira had worked with the Princeton district to find a way to accommodate actually close to the same number of people that had requested work from home within our district. I think when we're looking at 50%, we're talking about all accommodations perhaps. And those accommodations include things like spray bottles in classrooms or extra hand sanitizer. They're not large-scale accommodations to take into consideration the fact that we have staff members who are battling major diseases, who are immunocompromised, who have legitimate concerns that would be supported or were supported with medical documentation. So I just do want to clarify that it's not that 50% of the staff, 500 plus people, said they were looking to work from home. It was closer to 10%, and it's probably closer to maybe 500 sought some form of an accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodhue. I believe this is still Dana Gordon and not David Gordon. Apologies if we switched here. I'm promoting you to panelist, and then I will ask you to
Hello. No, this is David Gordon.
Okay. Sorry.
And I
You
still
switched
have
on
the
me.
virtual background from my virtual play the other day. Okay. Well, I'll leave it. So I just want, I had a thought earlier when some of the board members were saying that they were tired of having the same discussion. I think a lot of us are too. It made me think, some of you may know, I work in another district. One of our most recent board meeting, we had, most of it was a big presentation about the initiative toward equity and inclusion. And it was a really productive and, exciting meeting. There was very little discussion about COVID because the discussion really isn't happening at board meetings. It's happening at collaborative meetings between the administration, between the union leaders, between teacher representatives, principals. We have a group that's been meeting regularly, and decisions about when to open, when to close, what kind of timelines to use. Those are made around a Zoom meeting with representation from all the groups. Even board members are sometimes included in those meetings, or there are subgroups, so it doesn't need to be this way. There doesn't need to be fighting and public comments and people getting upset. And of course, some people will be upset one way or the other, but decisions really can be made in a much more collaborative way. I was really shocked. I know a lot of people are waiting on pins and needles to know one way or the other when we were going back to school today. And I was shocked to see that when I overheard my students, my children's classes Monday morning, that their teachers were saying things like, well, I'm not sure what our schedule's like next week, so you may have a test, but I'm not sure what day it'll be. And I said, wow, even the teachers? I thought maybe, maybe waiting until the parents is one thing, but that even the teachers weren't told until the very last minute. And it seems very strange that there's just not more discussion going on. So I really think that it'll be good to reconsider some of the way these decisions are being made. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I have somebody who's just in here as Al. We'll need your full name and address.
Hi, Alicia Gabriel-Bayless.
Thanks, Alicia. Yep, we hear you.
So I sent in an email, and I'm on Huffling in Hillsborough. I sent in an email before I read the bylaw and found it and read it. So I just wanted to show you one thing. Oh, also, I echo what David said about collaboration. It'd be really good to hear that everyone met first and then decided. But I just wanted to follow up on what I had said in my email, just to show you what this would look like in case you ever wanted to do something with the bylaw about the picking the presidents, and also when you have an empty seat, because anyway, I just wanted to show you that they have an app where you could just pick someone, you could put people's names in it, and it could just select, if you wanted to go the route of having a computer pick between the top 2 or 3 people. So, person C, they won. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Alicia. Okay. I don't see any other public comment. And so I will open it up for I don't see anybody. Joel, do you see anybody with their hand raised? There's nobody with their hand raised. Yeah, I see no hands being raised. Okay, so I still don't see any hands raised, so I'm going to close public comment and open up board comment. Any final board comment before we adjourn? Mrs. Stats and Mrs. Haas.
Like I said before, and it feels like several of us are speaking to no one. I don't know. I really want to emphasize the importance of collaboration. I think that would accomplish so much. addressing so many people's concerns and the feeling of being heard, and as well as part of good decision making. So I really like to encourage that, and hopefully that will happen.
Thank you. Mrs. Haas?
Yeah, I'd just like to offer a point of information. The American Association of Pediatricians still recommends that kids are best off being in school, period.
Spoken like the mother of a pediatrician.
Yes.
Anyone else? Mr. Gillette.
Yeah, so I just want to say, look, I don't want my comments earlier to be misconstrued and that I somehow don't take the COVID-19 seriously, or I think, I've had associates perish from this. I've had family members hospitalized. I have a very close personal friend hospitalized right now as we speak. And I take it seriously, but I also look at the science. I look at some logic in this. And I just can't get over the idea that there are, maybe not all the kids, maybe not 100% of the kids, but there's a large population of our students that are really being hurt by not having more in-person school. I know there are kids with special needs that are being hurt by not being in school. Our youngest kids are being hurt by not being more in school. So I echo what Jane said twice tonight now, and what other people have said. Let's find out a way to do it. I said months ago that, it'll probably take 100 virtual teaching positions. I think Mr. Goodhue echoed that tonight, that it's 100. We hear like 500, but we knew a long time ago it was about 100. Not that that's a minor, that's a lot. That's a lot. And you can't give them legal ADA accommodations, which could last for 5 years. Those are serious things. You can't make accommodations to say, but you can collaborate and figure out something. You can figure out something. And so that we could, if we had more teachers accommodated to where they felt safe, maybe we could have more hours in school for those parents that want and need their children to be in school more. That's the where it has to meet. If we could have people teaching all virtually, but then and look, the governor and for people who are maybe picked up on what Mr. Goodhue said about, we don't know, maybe some of the longer lasting effects. I don't know if Mr. Goodhue, but maybe some other people might have said it also. We might not know, what some of the effects on kids might be long term. Parents, the governor has allowed parents to keep their children home, and that there's no indication that he's lifting that. Anytime, I don't think that probably lifted this whole school year. That's just my intuition that we're gonna go all school year. If you want to be virtual, a school must accommodate all virtual students. So we'll always have that. But I think kids have social problems, emotional problems. I know we're very pleased that we haven't had a death from COVID of a school-age child in New Jersey, but I don't know the statistics on suicide of school-age children in New Jersey. I don't know if we've had that. I don't know what others, drug abuse statistics. There's all kinds of stories you read around the country of children really being hurt. But I'm not demanding that teachers, you all get in the classroom, let's all open up school right now. I'm asking that we work to find the solution. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not, that's all I just work to find it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Anyone else? Okay, then Mrs. Stats.
And just one small addition, and there's a whole spectrum of what can happen. It shouldn't be all or nothing. Either everyone works as is in school, or everyone who wants it can teach virtually. There's a whole spectrum of, through collaboration, we can decide who would that would be most beneficial for. Again, I know, and it is difficult. It's a difficult decision, but through collaboration, I think that's more achievable, as well as additional considerations of air purifiers and things like that added in the classrooms to increase the number of teachers teaching in the classroom.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then can I take a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. I think I heard Mrs. Haas. The second was Mrs. Maroon. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Our next meeting, as we said, is next Monday. Thank you.